What evil prank have you pulled off? Over a decade ago I worked in the warehouse of a guitar center. We dealt with inventory, shipping and receiving. We had a dumpster behind the store and a shared parking lot that people would leave random things in even though it was not a public dumpster. One day we found a broken beach chair in an open cardboard box. The box had a shipping label on it. It was left in such a way that it was easy to assume that the chair/box combo was left by the same person. We packed the beach chair in another box and shipped it back to the customer. I wish I was there to see the person's face when they received their trash back via UPS. Haha. I did something similar, but nowhere near this epic. There is a used bookstore that I go to sometimes. This bookstore sells used postcards. I bought a few that had been previously sent 20 to 30 years prior. I then slapped a fresh stamp on them and tossed them into the mailbox. I wish I could have seen the people's reaction when they showed up. I lived in Korea for a bit. When my mom came to visit I told my Korean girlfriend it was an American custom to greet older women by touching elbows. I told my mom the same story about Korean customs. It was a thing of beauty. They were not pleased. Simple, elegant, thoughtfully harmless. The perfect prank. Mom can't tolerate sweet things. Since she can remember, she never ate sweets. When I was 6 or so, during breakfast, Mom left her newly brewed coffee on the table. My older brother encouraged me to put more sugar as a prank. So I did. Mom came back, stirred and then drank and spit out a rocket. We started laughing saying it was a prank, explaining that we put extra sugar in it. She looked at us as if we were stupid. Apparently I put salt instead. Her coffee was at sea salt level. I used to work for a cruise line. A passenger asked if the crew lives on the ship full time. I and my coworker explained that no, the crew leaves every night to fly back to Miami and then returns each morning. She walked away satisfied. After that cruise was over, our manager was sharing the passenger evaluations with us and was confused about one in particular. It was a woman who had stayed on deck 14 and had complained that she couldn't sleep at night because of the noise of the crew helicopter. Fact 1, 1,200 crew do not leave every night but do live on the ship. Fact 2, that ship didn't even have a helipad. Question, WTF was she hearing every night? Gradually over the course of 2 weeks moved my coworker's monitors closer to the front edge of the desk. Like 1/4 of an inch per move. Until they were so close the keyboard barely fit. Stupid small desk, she grumbled, near the end. I then moved them back, just as slowly, over a few weeks. She never caught on. Michael. People in school used to always take my Gatorade. So I took an empty bottle, filled it with dyed salt water, and let them take my drink. Not gonna lie, it was hilarious watching one person to spit salt water in the middle of class only for their unbelieving friend to do the same. They just take your Gatorade? Bullies. One night I replaced every framed object in my boss's office with a picture of me making a stern face. Posters, certificates, photos, etc. took like 3 hours because he had like 30 framed things in his office. The next day I made sure I was out doing field work to make him sit with it most of the day. He had a lot of foot traffic to look at his office that day. I worked in an office that had 4 offices with shared partitions that had glass at the top. My neighbor wasn't the most observant person and kind of a dick, so I started printing random pictures like Nicolas Cage and setting them on my side of the office facing into his. He never noticed. It got to the point where everyone else in the office would check what photo I had set that week but he never caught on. I remember it like it was yesterday. At summer camp my cabin's leaders found a little snake that wasn't doing so well so they decided to put it in an old terrarium in our cabin. A few of the guys were nervous about it. So the next day when the leaders decided the snake was well enough to release, I asked that they keep quiet about releasing it. When the other guys got back to the cabin and found no snake in the terrarium, chaos ensued. One year, my sister had to move back into my parents' house. I was like 15, she was a little older, mid-20s. April Fool's comes, and I know my sister woke up at like 6 a.m. So I took out the light in the kitchen, put Vaseline all on the refrigerator handle, and put a rubber band around the water gun on the sink. I waited for her to go in the kitchen. I was in my room pretending to be asleep, and all I heard was it. Followed by it. Followed by her screaming my name and waking up my parents. My parents were not happy, floor was soaked with water, and it woke both of them up. I do it again though. Edit, water gun thing. There is a small little black sprayer to the right of the sink. You pull it out, it has a hose connected to it, and you can spray down dishes and such. Early days of networked PCs. DOS and NetWare. I worked in a computer lab on campus. There weren't a lot of management utilities available at the time, so I, and a few other/student employees, wrote batch scripts and small programs to automate a few things when a student or professor would log onto the network. Having that sort of access led to numerous pranks being pulled, but most of us were savvy enough to figure it out and undo the prank. However, we had two coworkers who liked to loaf a bit too much for our liking. They were not at all technical and had taken the lab assistant job because they thought it was easy money. They had conspired to be assigned to a remote classroom lab, that rarely had any students in it who would need assistance, for most of their working hours. They would just sit around and play games on the PCs while the rest of us were, working. Clearly this could not stand. I rewrote a piece of code that was executed when every single user signed on. If the username was either one of these two and they were signing in on a PC in that remote classroom and it was during their working hours, it would look at an innocuous file on the network. The file merely had a few bytes in it which noted how long it had been since this prank had last been triggered, ensuring that it would run once or twice a week maximum. If it did activate, it would launch a terminate and stay resident program which would wait a random time, between 5 to 15 minutes, and then drop an image of two dudes 69ing on the monitor for a few seconds and reboot the PC. Tested it. Put the compiled program in place and deleted the source. Much hilarity ensued for the next 2 semesters. I worked at a fast food where the boss was too cheap to get AC installed. In the super hot summer days we would all sweat so much that we could wring sweat out of our uniforms. There was this boy who I had a love-hate relationship with. We would always prank each other, but mine were always tame, until one day. He left his drink in the back while he was flipping burgers. I grabbed a vinegar packet, cut open a corner and put a straw directly into it and exchanged it with the straw from his drink. Moments later, I was in the front of the store and I heard him spit and scream my name while calling me a bitch. He still high-fived me. One that was played on me. I took my SATs, college entrance exams, for those outside the US, on April 1st. Should have known, right? But apparently, I'm not that smart. That night I went out with a group of friends, and when I got home my mom met me with a serious look on her face. She told me that the testing committee had called, that there had been an error and all test papers from that day were lost. Everyone was being contacted to schedule a day to retake the exam. She totally sold it. Face, reactions, everything. I bought it hook, line, and sinker. And she let me believe it until lunchtime the next day. My mom is a diabolical person. I put hot sauce on my little brother's toothpaste one morning when we were kids. He apparently thought he was being poisoned. I got pranked. Does that count? Was at a house party at my then girlfriend's place. She knew me really well and knew that I've got a fairly competitive spirit. The place is really dark. She turns to me in the dim light and says, "My name, I bet you can't fit an orange in your mouth and eat it all in one bite." Wasn't about to say no to a challenge, so I took her up on it, only it wasn't an orange that she'd peeled but a lemon. Working in a hot factory, supervisor and job planner in this enclosed cubicle with a window AC unit in the middle of the shop, aka nice 68 in there while we sweat our ass off in 95 to 110 F heat. Kinda hot and pissy and always flies around. I kept grabbing the flies alive, walking into the cubicle to ask a usually legit question or say I'm just cooling off and opening my hand behind my back. I put 14 of those in there in one shift. He never did catch on I was doing it and the planner was pissed swatting around, there were so many flies in there. Supervisor was cleaning out every crevice thinking some food is supporting life now somewhere. Dude was harassing my ex because he used to have her cell phone number. Was being a real f***ing creep. Anyways, I created an email address, signed up to Kijiji and placed an ad offering an 80 inches 3D TV for free with some excuse about a bad breakup and not wanting her to get it. I asked people to only text or call. I then went to bed and forgot all about it until the next day at work I get a text from my ex asking if I had done something on Kijiji. The dude was begging her to take the ad down and apologizing. I checked the email and there were 5 pages of responses even though I had told them not to email but to call or text. Dude's phone must have been ringing constantly. I took the ad down and she never heard from him again. Similar, but old school. As in, late 1970s, so the statute of limitations is past. Worked in the local library as a teen, and some guy did something that passed off my coworker and then, best friend. So we started harvesting blow-in postcards from the magazine section. Every magazine. And handwrote the jerk's name and address on hundreds, at least, of postcards. Free subscription? Sure. Collectible plates? Yep. Columbia Records? Enjoy your free dozen Albanian opera records. Book of the month? Silver spoons? Travel offers? Cruises? Bring 'em all on. Do you know how many magazines libraries get? Or got, back then? The New Yorker, Sports Illustrated, Cosmo, Playboy, Reader's Digest, Car and Driver, Road and Track, National Geographic, Photography, Model Railroading, Science Fiction, every niche you can imagine. And we had 13 months or more of each. We'd grab a couple of cards or a dozen per shift, fill them out, and drop them in random mailboxes when we were out on our bikes. Took a couple months to kick in, and several more months for the tsunami to really hit. USPS stopped delivering to his house. Police were called, but the processing houses evidently didn't keep the postcards, and my prints weren't in the system yet anyway. We stopped after a Christmas break flurry. Until right before school started the following summer. One last blast of probably 50 more postcards with the most bizarre and offensive offers we could find. No one ever suspected us. I used to work at a science tutoring center when I was in college and my gap year before professional school. One of the things we taught very often was anatomy. So naturally we acquired a few skeletons and various skulls with some variation in how they looked or were marked etc. Well, I was closing one night, and I knew my coworker was opening the next morning early, so before I locked up I assorted all of the skeletons and skulls in a welcome party near the front door. I had one immediately at the opening of the only door into the room with several backup skeletons and skulls just behind at a table together watching on. The best part was that you have to turn on the lights manually and that switch is immediately to the side of the door opening, so when she reached down to turn on the lights she had to come face to face with some lifeless skeleton skull in the middle of the shady opening. Needless to say she screamed, and it was loud enough to make our boss come to see if she was okay. Woke up to some colorful text Slamau. Still proud of that one honestly. My coworkers in the Chicago office asked me to bring back a phone book and the hotel stationery for my business trip to Kansas City. They were preparing for another coworker's bachelor party for the night before the wedding. The groom was known for drinking to an extent that was considered legendary. After a night of drinking, he woke up on the morning of his wedding in a hotel room. He checked the nightstand and found the Kansas City phone book. The desk was stocked with Casey stationery. His friends had clued the front desk staff in on what was happening and convinced them to answer his room phone good morning and welcome to the Kansas City Holiday Inn. It was 5 hours till the wedding, and he was actually only a couple miles from the venue, but the freakout was epic. Once I asked a friend for another friend's phone number. He gave me a teacher's number. I then went on to send multiple messages in a fake angry tone to my unsuspecting teacher. That diabolical genius of a friend. Haha, kinda similar to what I did. My friend, let's call him Neil, because that's his name, wanted to prank a mutual friend of ours who was traveling abroad at the time. While this mutual friend was in Sweden, Neil texted everyone in his phone book and told them all that this mutual friend, Chris, had West Nile virus. It was a well-known, media scare disease at the time. Well, people went insane. This mutual friend Chris was waking up to hundreds of missed calls and texts asking him how he was and if he needed anything while he was in the hospital. Anywho, Neil took a quick break from swarming people's inboxes with West Nile news, and I swiftly changed my contact profile in his phone to Verizon WRLSS, and deleted all of our texts. After about an hour, I started secretly sending texts to Neil stating, "Your data usage for this month is nearing the maximum on the account." This was back in the days before unlimited talk and text, so going over the monthly data plan meant an ass whooping from your parents. Whoa, I sent so many texts that Verizon said I'm using almost all my data for the month. Neil said, and he put his phone away. "'Kay, I'm done for the night." I waited about 5 more minutes before sending about 10 messages in a row. "Your data usage for the month is now at maximum usage. Any additional calls or texts will incur a new cost of $10 per message/call. Before he could read on to the second message I sent, he was already in full meltdown mode. "I just kept sending. Your monthly bill has now increased to $249.99 for February." And with every text, his eyes watered and his blood ran cold at the thought of his dad seeing this bill. All for a harmless prank. By the end of the night I had sent a running bill up to $790 before finally telling him it was all a joke. His mixed look of relief, hatred, appreciation, and impressed was something I'll never forget, and even brought it up at his wedding 10 years later. I created a fake uniform policy poster for my high school. It wasn't perfect, but people were idiots, so they fell for it. It took everyone about a week to actually read the poster and see that it was obviously fake. Some people still showed up on the first day wearing the uniform that I designed. Edit: the uniform wasn't anything idiotic looking. Just khaki pants, white button shirt, church shoes, and black socks. The outrage was mostly from the fact that people couldn't wear their name brand clothes as a flex. One summer in college, I worked in the registrar's office, registering all the incoming freshmen. A professor who was a mentor to me was teaching freshman seminar and asked me to hand-pick a class for her. Straight A students, high SATs, whatever. So I did. 15 students, all named Sarah. Not sure if this will be seen, but my best New Year's was that of 1999. I was 9 years old at the time and I worked together with my dad to pull off the greatest prank in history. A few minutes before midnight I synced up a wristwatch with the countdown on TV. My dad pointed me in the direction of the breaker which was in our garage and showed me the lever to pull which would cut all power to the house. Now I don't know if you remember the hype, but the year 2000 was supposed to destroy all of our computers and technology, sending us back to the Stone Ages. So the moment grew closer as I watched the seconds tick by on my wristwatch. It soon became apparent that I wouldn't need it as I could hear all my relatives inside counting down 10, 9, 8, 2, 1. I pulled the lever at the perfect timing and everything went black. The first thing I heard was from my aunt, "Oh my god, IT hit, Y2K hit." I was only going to leave the power out for 10 seconds or so, but the lever was stuck and I couldn't get it back up for about 2 minutes, during which the whole time I heard my family freaking out. Then eventually they looked outside and started to wonder why our neighbors still had power. Haha, thinking back I really wish we would have recorded this, probably could have won $10,000. TL, Doctor pulled the greatest prank in history on New Year's Eve 1999. I was 9. My dad just had hernia surgery the day prior and was recuperating on the couch. Before I left for school, I put the Martha Stewart channel on and left the remote just beyond his reach. He spent 8 hours learning how to arrange pillows on a bed. He exacted his revenge 15 years later. I just had my emergency C-section and he put Frozen on and left it on a loop while the entire family left for the mall and left the remote just out of my reach. Revenge is indeed a dish best served cold. 2 of my friends have never met each other. Before they spoke I told both of them that the other is a bit deaf. They shouted at each other for a few minutes before they realized that I'm an asshole.